Welcome to our Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood podcast. I'm Megan. And
I am Meg.
Alright, so we are going to be talking through Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, which is an anime that we are both very fond of, that we first watched about a year ago now, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, so we should probably just start with who we are and how we know each other and why we're doing this podcast.
Oh, we went to school together. We were randomly assigned roommates first semester of college.
So I was an animation major and Meg's a bio major. So kind of like an unlikely pair, but we had a lot of similar interests.
Mm-hmm.
We both loved Marvel and Broadway musicals.
Yes,
and
that
reading
was
books. And
that's the first thing I remember is Broadway musicals.
Mm-hmm.
And you introduced me to Dear Evan Hansen.
Yes, and you introduced me to a bunch of different things. And we both got into Hades Town around the same time, too.
That sounds kind of ominous. You introduced me to a bunch of different things.
Gateway drugs into anime. Your brother introduced you to anime, so that's not on me.
Yes, he did.
So, we were roommates for 2 years in college, and Meg graduated early, and she is now doing a graduate program for, what's your specific, what is it specifically?
Yes, so the program that I'm in is genetics and cell biology, and I am working towards getting my PhD, which is super exciting.
Yeah, and I just graduated in December. I have a degree in animation and illustration and a minor in theater, and I'm going to see how far that can get me. And my goal is to make my own manga someday too, but we'll see how that goes.
You can do it.
But getting back to the podcast and why we're here. So obviously we wanted to talk about this show because it's one of our favorites. And we decided to release this first episode on October 3rd specifically because it is a very important date to the show, which we will learn later. Why don't you say the reasons that you love Fullmetal Brotherhood, Meg?
It's hard to say what my favorite things are about it because there's so many.
Mm-hmm.
I love the characters, especially Ed and Al, and like their relationship. I have lots of siblings, and I don't know, it just reminds me of my own relationships. And I like that the show also covers like so many different parts of life, like philosophy and science and relationships and many other things.
Yes.
Why do you like the show?
I like it because this show has no fear. It delves into things that you don't think a cartoon would go into. And I know anime is definitely more heavy on subject matter than Western cartoons are, with the exception of like Gravity Falls, maybe, or Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Or Over the Garden Wall.
Over the Garden, yes. So it can be pretty heavy, but Western animation tends to be more like with the implications. And you're supposed to just think about it after the show is over, which I really like. I love a show that makes you think. But with Fullmetal, they directly approach hard topics, and they don't tell you how to think about them, but they give these unique characters a chance to express their different perspectives, and you get to see how different people interpret different things. So, like, Fullmetal goes into how to deal with death, for example, or what people think of religion, or how far should science advance before it's too far, and these things that normally you want to suspend reality when you watch a show because you want to escape from reality and just be entertained. But this one kind of connects you to life while you're entertained. Super fun. And of course, I love the animation.
Why did we decide to make this show?
Yeah. We decided to make a podcast because every time we talk about brotherhood, we are talking for like hours on end. And at the end of our discussions, we're like Dang, we should have recorded this because
Yes.
it's been pretty good.
Yeah. I honestly, I don't think a week goes by where we don't mention Brotherhood.
So what will we bring to fans who are listening to this podcast? Why should you listen to us?
Because we're awesome. I think we will offer in this podcast is, well, Megan majored in animation and I majored in biology, which I think are two things that get talked about often in the show. And I think we can offer insights into that. And also, we have had a lot of conversations about the meanings behind the show and the messages, and done a lot of our own research that we would like to share with everyone.
Yeah, I think that passion inspires passion. So when anyone talks about something that they love, the people listening want to check it out. So hopefully this could be kind of like, I've listened to plenty of podcasts that are like watch along podcasts. You can watch the next episode and come to your own conclusions and then listen to us and see if our opinions line up.
Also, we should say where you can watch it on.
Yeah, so Fullmetal used to be on Netflix before they took it off, but now you can watch it on either Funimation or Crunchyroll, which the two companies sort of merged, but there's I don't know.
If you still have a Funimation account, you can watch it on there.
Yep.
I just think you can't make a new Funimation account anymore.
Right. So we do recommend watching the dub. That is what we will be covering. If you want to watch the sub, that is totally fine. I know a lot of people are fans, but strangely enough, this is one of like the only anime where people aren't over the top vicious about the sub dub divide that happens. And then I like listening to the dub because of all the work it takes for the voice actors to like line up their acting with the mouth movements with the characters, and they still have to somehow get the emotions across as well. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, like have said to you before, is I think it's you have a valid excuse for watching dub because you really like to pay attention to the animation, and it's hard to do that when you're trying to read the subtitles.
Yes. And I understand why you like sub, because you get the raw emotion that the original actors put into it.
Yes. And I also don't like to wait for the dub. So okay, and then our favorite characters from Fullmetal.
Yeah.
I will go first.
Yes.
So my favorite character is Edward Elric. And we wrote a little description of our favorite characters. So for Edward Elric, he is deeply loyal and short-tempered, especially when it comes to his lack of height. Ed is the main protagonist who is motivated by brotherly love and his past mistakes, which are steep. The most stylish of the Brotherhood characters, he usually wears platform boots, probably to add to his height, black leather pants, a big belt with his silver watch, a black tank top, and a red hooded cloak. Ed doesn't really show affection outright, but he demonstrates it through his actions.
And I had to choose my favorite character as well, and I really do love Ed. I think he's the perfect protagonist for this, but I decided to choose a villain for my favorite just because I really do enjoy a good villain in a story, even though I'm usually not a fan of the villains. Mm-hmm. It's odd, but in this case, I make an exception. So I said Envy. A strange character to like, Envy is actually one of the main bad guys of Brotherhood. However, he shows some of the widest range of emotions of any character. Besides his strange character arc, he is also wry, sarcastic, mischievous, and has one of the coolest character designs. So let's get into episode 1 of Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, which, by the way, is an anime original episode. So what happened was that the manga, Fullmetal Alchemist, written by Hiromi Arakawa, was adapted into an anime in 2003, just titled Fullmetal Alchemist. And it was a big hit, except it deviated from the manga. So it deviated from the canon storyline, which, to its credit, people tend to like the original quite a bit, even though it's different. I am not one of those people, and I don't think you are either, Meg, but
Nope.
it does have its merits at times.
Yeah, and we have watched the original, and we will sprinkle in comments about it.
We also watched the movie that came after the original too.
Yes.
But yeah, getting back to Brotherhood, Brotherhood was made in 2012, and it is more closely adapted from the manga.
So this is a summary of the show from Crunchyroll. Disregard for alchemy's laws ripped half of Ed Elric's limbs from his body and left Al's soul clinging to a suit of armor. To restore what was lost, the brothers seek the Philosopher's Stone. Enemies and allies, the corrupt military, the homunculi, and foreign alchemists will alter the Elric's course, but their purpose will remain unchanged and their bond unbreakable.
The description of the first episode from Crunchyroll is: the Elric brothers adjust to military life and take part in a manhunt for the dangerous Isaac the Freezer, a former state alchemist bent on bringing Fuhrer Bradley down. This episode is an anime original, so it also includes an anime original character, Isaac McDougall, who's the freezing alchemist, and he is played by Brian Macy. And just a mild disclaimer, we are going to mispronounce plenty of names while doing this podcast, and we apologize in advance.
So episode 1, Fullmetal Alchemist. The very first scene, we open on Central, which is the capital of Amestris, and we zoom in to the office of Fuhrer King Bradley and Roy Mustang, a colonel in the military, talking about the freezing alchemist. Now they're trying to track him down, capture him, and they want to bring in this young and spunky.
Yeah, spunky is a word for him.
Young and spunky alchemist. Then we just cut to Edward Elric and Alphonse just chilling in a really cool way on like a roof. Yeah, like, they're like hot stuff.
Yeah, they are hot stuff. And it's surprising because Edward, especially in the manga, he is drawn and you realize this is a kid. He is about 15 years old when this starts, but he's quite small, and he's still got his chubby baby cheeks.
Yes.
And he has this air of confidence about him, though, that kind of like, if you see that in a 15-year-old, usually you're kind of like, this kid doesn't know what the world is like, but you can see something about his posture and the way he dresses that lets you know that this kid is street smart. And Alphonse is in this giant suit of armor that completely dwarfs Ed. He's like 7 feet tall, but then Al talks, and it's a 14-year-old boy with like a really high-pitched voice. So it's a little bit jarring to realize that these two kids are revered in this world and are powerful.
Next scene. I see the freezing alchemist like running around, and he has this like cool metal cuff on his arm with like circular symbol on it, and he's like using it to both freeze people and like boil them alive, which is like pretty
heartless.
Yeah. And then Ed shows up, and he first makes a spear, which comes back kind of fairly often in the show, but it like quickly switches to he makes an Ed face club.
He always has to put his face on everything.
Yeah, and he does this by just like clapping his hands together, and he makes it. And the freezing alchemist is kind of like, what, the no transmutation circle, which is what the symbol on his arm is.
So in this world, alchemy is like, it's a science, but when you watch a show, you're like, ooh, it's magic. But it actually has like laws and rules, and you have to know how to do it. So it's like learning a trade, but usually when somebody uses it, they either have the symbols tattooed or carved on their person, or it's like on their clothing. If you don't have that, you have to use chalk or some writing implement to draw the symbols and like press your hands to them in a certain way to make what you want to happen. But with Ed, he claps his hands together and can just make things. It's not just making things appear. You can't make something out of nothing, but it's like manipulating the matter around him.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Kind of like, I would say the first big thing that happens is the freezing alchemist like tries to like destroy, like kill Ed basically, and by like touching his arm, and nothing happens. Instead, does his coat rip?
Yeah, I think right away. Like a recoil.
Yeah, he kind of rips his coat off, and you see that his arm is made of metal. And it in this world, it's called automail.
Yes. In our world, it's called cybernetics. But even though this is a steampunk setting in like the early 1900s, we in modern technology do not have anything close to what Ed has. He can fully move his arm in all the ways a natural arm can move. He can close his fist like a regular hand. There's no delay. He can punch. He can even use his alchemy to clap his hands, touch his arm, and turn like the fingers into a spear.
The freezing alchemist it's interesting because he recognizes Ed right away as a Fullmetal alchemist, which usually does not happen in this show. Everybody thinks that it's the suit of armor that is made of metal, full
who
metal.
Is giant and imposing and looks dangerous.
Yes, and then first he kind of gives Ed this honor of recognizing him as a Fullmetal alchemist, but then he calls him little or young, and that sets Ed off.
Ed and Al do very well against Mr. Freeze the first time they interact. Freeze is captured, but as the people in uniform, the military, as they take him away, he is able to fall over and press his hand to the ground where there's like a puddle of water. And of course, since he can manipulate water, he creates steam and is able to escape, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And kind of another interesting thing, it gives you a little bit insight into who Ed is. He like goes ahead and fixes his coat, which you kind of see in the background. He cares about his look. He's cultivated a certain look, and
he's got a style, his own. But it could be another way to hide his automail.
Yeah, that's
so people don't judge him based on
exactly
looks.
What I was going to say, because and also many times in the show, it's kind of like a big reveal. So also maybe a little bit he likes to be a little bit dramatic.
Yes, it's perfect for him though, because he's got to make a name for himself somehow, and if you can't have fun with it, he's this kid who he's a state alchemist, so he's in the military. And when you're 15 and you're in a serious situation like that, like I know in America you can't join the military till you're 17, but imagine being a 15-year-old and you've got so much expectation piled on you. He's got to somehow alleviate the pressure.
Yeah. And also at least fighting, it gives you kind of a element of surprise too. Yeah. Like, whoa, he's got a metal arm, and that kind of can throw people off.
And we can track this as we do this podcast, but how many times has that saved his life with people not knowing that he's got metal?
Yeah, yeah. So then we kind of go back to Roy's office. Also, I think, does he call him Colonel Mustang? I feel
I believe he just calls him Colonel.
Okay, yeah.
Because Ed has to, sometimes be respectful of military command.
Yeah, yep. And all we put here is
Ed is a potty mouth and Roy is a dad.
Yes. And they kind of give a little bit of background on Freeze. He was part of the Ishvalan. He was a soldier or he was an alchemist in
He
the
was,
Ishvalan War.
yeah, he was in the Ishvalan War as an alchemist.
And then he joined the anti-establishment movement, which I'm pretty sure we never hear that name again.
No, I'm sure there's dissent in the city against the government, but it's not so openly discussed at all.
Yes, and we hear Roy mention talking about the boys trying to get their bodies back. He also tells Ed that they need to capture this dude, dead or alive, and Ed's like, nope, he's going to be alive. Yep. Yeah.
Ed absolutely refuses to kill anyone in the series, which is something I appreciate
that's
about
a
him.
theme throughout the show, and
yes,
definitely. I think we see why, you know, as the show goes on.
Yes,
and then also, in this scene, the very last part of this scene, we get introduced to another character who is important to the show, Maze Hughes, Colonel Maze Hughes. He bursts in and immediately talks about his family and pulls out a photo, and he forces Ed and Al to come back home with him.
Yes. Hughes is a very close friend of Mustang, and while Mustang is kind of like the hard, tough love supporter of Ed and Al, Hughes is very open and loving. He has a family of his own, so he likes to treat the other kids of the show like they're his kids, and I really appreciate him.
Mm-hmm. So then, we go back to May's home, we'll just call him Maze.
Yeah. We're on first name basis.
Yeah, we are. I don't know about anybody else, but and we meet his very adorable daughter, Alicia, and she immediately proceeds to make another short joke about Ed.
Yes.
And
big brother, little brother. And Ed is adamant that he is the big brother, but Alicia is like, no, you're shorter, so you must be the little brother. Ed's trying to hold back his anger, but you can see him kind of making a fist and holding himself back and trembling with rage.
Yeah.
He would punch this child if she weren't so adorable.
Yes. And then while they're eating, they're like, Al, why aren't you eating? You need to eat up. And they first excuse of many. What he said that he's training.
My alchemy training. Yeah, and poor Al, because Ed is just Hughes' wife is an amazing cook, which we will see throughout the show. Her name's Gracia, and she makes a quiche, and Ed is very exuberant and wow, this is the best, this is so good, and he's just horking it down, and Al's just there I think he's holding a knife and fork, maybe, but he's not eating, or he just doesn't touch his plate. And of course, whenever somebody sees Al in a setting where he's supposed to be eating, they always ask, what's wrong? Is the food not to your liking? Stuff like that. Are you okay? Why don't you eat? And he tries to be as casual about it as possible, but, so the next scene, Freeze, who had escaped, visits somebody in prison, somebody named Kimberly. And he talks to Kimberly and tries to convince him to join his cause, which Kimberly is not really into doing. So that's a lost cause, and Freeze leaves the prison, and you see that he had killed the guard in order to get in there. But he leaves, and then it cuts back to Maze Hughes' house, and it's late at night, and he talks to his wife, and he's concerned about Ed and Al. The state alchemists are called Dogs of the Military, and that is a title that is not very flattering, and Maze is just very concerned that these boys are going to be in tough situations because their lives are pretty much owned by the government at this point, and he doesn't know what the government will ask them to do. And they're such sweet kids, and he doesn't want anything bad to befall them. And it cuts to Ed and Al, who are in their shared bedroom that the Hughes family gave them. And they're talking, and they mention getting their bodies back again, which is a phrase that I don't know how many times is repeated throughout this show. That is the midway point of the episode, so we get our first mid-cards before the quote-unquote commercial breaks, and we get this voice saying, Fullmetal Alchemist.
Fullmetal Alchemist.
Exactly. And the first card is one of Ed, and then brief pause as Crunchyroll buffers, and then Fullmetal Alchemist, and we get a card of Al. And we'll probably just mention who is on each card every episode, but, it's not a big deal. But the art's pretty cool, so look them up if you can.
Yeah.
All right, moving on.
Yep, everybody's on manhunt looking for the freezing alchemist.
Gloves are on as Roy searches for him, and usually we would say the gloves are off, but in this case, Roy's alchemy comes from his gloves that he wears, which is super cool. The Fuhrer had ordered to kill on sight, but Roy wants to be the first to find the freezing alchemist, which is odd because I think the motive here might be that Roy does not want to kill him. If anyone else found him first, they would kill on sight. But maybe Roy wants to interrogate him, or maybe he doesn't want to kill for some reason. That's never specifically answered, but we do get to meet another alchemist who is on the scene, Alex Louise Armstrong. He is very flashy, and he has like these brass knuckle looking things with spikes on them, so that's how his alchemy works, and he can punch rock and send projectiles flying at people. And normally he makes like spear-headed projectiles, but oftentimes he will make tiny like heads of himself.
Yes.
Just in case you're wondering who's gonna kill you.
Yeah, he's kind of like Ed in that way where he likes to.
Yes. So obviously this freezing guy is very dangerous if so many alchemists are after him, and he is very dangerous. He makes a steam explosion, and one of the best scenes from this episode happens where Al yanks Ed to him, turns around, and shields Ed with his entire body, which is so sweet. Their bond is so strong.
Mm-hmm.
And Ed's just like, yeah, thanks for the save, and, moving on. We almost lost our lives, but I guess that happens to them.
Just, normal Monday.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, and then the freezing alchemist gets kind of cornered by Roy. It doesn't start raining. He
sends water to spray straight into Roy's face.
And then Roy cannot use his alchemy. And then the freezing alchemist kind of escapes, or does escape from Roy, and he goes back to the circles that he has been seen making, kind of throughout this episode, and he activates them. And we see this quick scene of some random dude like opening his eyes.
He awakens.
Yes. And Ed and Al kind of rush in and they're like, "You have a philosopher's stone," or
something of the sort. Yeah. Yes, they see
or like you're using
red light and deduce that he has this stone, which apparently can make the user more powerful and defy the laws of alchemy. And they start fighting the freezing alchemist. So Al, being as big and bulky as he is actually more agile than he seems, and he's a very good fighter. And Ed, even though he's small, is way stronger than he looks, which kind of can be attributed to how he wears like really baggy clothing, so you never see how muscular he actually is, but he's real tough. They quickly realize they cannot take him down on their own, and the freezing alchemist is spreading ice throughout the entire city, like he's going to coat the place.
From the circles the transmuting circles that he has activated.
Yes, it's going to encircle everything. Armstrong tries to stop it, but his alchemy can't. Ed and Al launch themselves on top of this giant ice wall that the freezing alchemist is riding on, and this big fight scene starts, which is really awesome and well choreographed. Unfortunately, during that fight, the freezing alchemist kind of overpowers them and knocks Al's head clean off. But we see that he's not injured, and there's no body inside of the armor. All we see is a symbol written in blood on the inside of his armor. It's a soul bond. And Freeze sees it and says that the boys committed the ultimate taboo. And we get this brief flashback scene. And in it, we see a younger Ed who is very obviously injured. He is missing his leg, and he's crawling on the ground with blood splattered everywhere, saying things like, "What have I done?" And he's gone. And it's a very, very small flashback, but we will see more of that later as we learn about the characters. But after the freezing alchemist mentions the taboo, Ed gets really defensive and very protective of Al. And he says a line, "Some lines you shouldn't cross," which could have a double meaning. That getting Ed really mad and like protecting his younger brother means like he's more powerful. Like if you mess with Al, Ed is going to go supercharged. He is able to get the upper hand, but unfortunately Freeze has been holding back this little trick of his, which Meg and I call bloodbending, which is an Avatar reference. But basically, the human body is made up of about 70-ish% water. So he can freeze the water in his blood and create like blood spears and projectiles, and he just like straight up stabs Ed in the left shoulder, which, you know, he doesn't have auto mail on that shoulder, so it goes right through his flesh, which would hurt quite a bit.
But he just like pulls the shards out and is like,
"Let's go."
Yep. Kind of Ed and Al are kind of out of the fight. And the freezing alchemist is running down an alley, and we see Fuhrer King Bradley standing there.
He is strangely calm.
Yeah, he's just standing there, and it's really cool because the screen goes gray except for everything in red. So you can see the freezing alchemist, like he has blood running down his face and his arms, and he's not looking too hot. He rushes to the Fuhrer because this is his chance to kill him and take him down, and he's dead.
That didn't last long.
Very quickly, like you don't even see it. He
pulls out a sword or something.
Pulls out a sword and kills him. And something interesting is we see like this red ball like fall out of
about the size of a pearl, I'd say.
Out of the alchemist, and it kind of just disintegrates, and it quickly like cuts back to the dude in the prison, and he's
Kingsley, yes.
Yeah, he knows.
He can somehow sense that happened.
Yeah.
And that Freeze is dead. It's like, oh, what a shame. But he says it with a smile, so it's not really a shame.
Yes. And then finally, to kind of like finish up the episode, we see a couple different things. That the fight's over. Roy and Armstrong destroy the circles, and the man that we saw earlier open his eyes, quickly cuts back, and he closes them.
So whatever awakened has retreated for the moment.
Yes.
The danger is over, and our characters can relax for a bit. Ed and Al are in the hospital because, yes, Ed did get stabbed in the shoulder, and yes, that would hurt. So he's, just relaxing on a hospital bed with his arm wrapped up like nothing happened. Armstrong, sweet guy, comes to visit him in the hospital and brings flowers and his quote-unquote manly physique to help Ed feel better. He just like rips off his shirt and he's like, "Here's what a healthy body looks like. Use it to inspire you to get better." Like that's how healing works.
Yes. And then the final scene of the episode kind of sets up for the next episode. We see a woman talking on the phone, and she's informed of the freezing alchemist's death. And we also see another man / creature more, who she calls Gluttony, eating something. And
I think she says something like, "Gluttony, don't smack your mouth like that. It's rude."
Yeah. And she's like, everything's ready in the
Going
yard,
good in
or
the
everything
yard.
going
Yes.
well in the yard, sounding very ominous.
Yes.
And
Lior is
that
another
is-
town, and it's you
Yes.
can briefly see it right before the end credits
Oh,
roll, and it's
yeah.
bathed in this red light, and it's creepy.
Yes.
Now that we've finished talking about the first episode, and there's so much more we could talk about, but we'll save those for other episodes of this podcast. However, we briefly want to mention a couple of things, especially about the manga, because that is what this is based on. And I love comic books and graphic novels and all things of that ilk. So Meg and I have agreed to read the manga along with watching the show, because that's really cool. And I've already noticed some differences, so we're going to be talking about those. But quick note about the manga. In this episode, since it's an anime original, we do not have any manga content, except the first ever page of the manga is of that brief flashback where we saw the young Edward Elric in. And it's a scene with all the blood and this injured little boy on the ground, which gives you a sense for, oh my goodness, this show is going to be something. But the quote on that page of the manga says, "Teachings that do not speak of pain have no meaning, because humankind cannot gain anything without first giving something in return." So that's kind of scary, actually. And a little bit about the author. She was born and raised on a dairy farm. She was a manga assistant and eventually published her own work, Stray Dog, in 1999. She has won multiple awards. Her actual name is Hiromi Arakawa. Her pen name is Hiromu Arakawa. The pen name was so people wouldn't write off her series because she was a female publishing shonen manga. And the manga ran from July 2001 to June 2010 with 27 volumes and 10 light novels that she helped work on. And there were 2 animes made from it, 2 movies made from it. We also wanted to do some voice acting notes because the voice actors in the show are very, very talented. So the first one, we will save a lot of them for different episodes, especially the episodes where characters have their official introduction. There were a lot of characters introduced in this first episode, but we will just be covering Ed's actor, Al's actor, and of course our anime original character, the freezing alchemist actor. So Edward Elric is played by Vic Mignogna, and yes, I looked up how to say that last name. He also played Rin from Free, Broly from Dragon Ball Z, and Tamaki from Ouran High School Host Club. Al was played by Maxie Whitehead, who also played Kasuma from the second My Hero Academia movie, young Rin from Free, which is really adorable, and she also played Truth in Brotherhood. We'll meet it later. And Dende from Dragon Ball Z, don't know if I'm saying that right, but she took over the role of Al from Aaron Dismuke, who played Alphonse in the 2003 anime. And Aaron also plays Tamaki, but from My Hero Academia. He was also, I think, Hero from the 2001 Fruits Basket, but he's been in more recent anime. And finally, Brian Massey was the Frisian Alchemist. He also plays Crimson Riot from My Hero Academia, Hagane from Dr. Stone, and Oolong from Dragon Ball.
What are our first impressions of specifically Edward Elric and Alphonse Elric?
Yes, and we don't need to give first impressions of Freeze because he gone.
Yeah.
Yeah. Edward. I like his style.
Yeah, I agree. I like his style. I also like Tally's a little bit touchy about his height.
I understand.
Yeah, which like the first time I watched it, I will say I was like, this is fine. It's not my favorite thing ever, but it grows on you. Yeah, it grows on you.
He's got a bunch of short rants later on.
Yes, that are like so amazing.
And we're both shorter people,
yes,
so
shorter.
It's great.
Yeah. And also like you can really tell that he cares about his brother and like pretty protective of him. He also just kind of seems like a normal teenage boy in some ways. Like he's kind of like a little bit moody, and he's not very and not the most respectful of his superiors. Yeah.
He's the best facial expressions too.
Yes. Yeah. And then Alphonse is the sweetest.
So
he also is protective. He's protective of his brother a lot too. And he's
very responsible, even though he's younger.
Yeah, he is. And like, even though like I just said, like, Ed does have a moral compass, at the same time, like, Alphonse always like, brother, like, you shouldn't do that. And like he's always like trying. Yeah, exactly. Like he's always trying to like correct,
Yeah, I think when we first met Alphonse in the show and I heard his voice, I was just like, what on earth? And it was so jarring that I wasn't sure if I liked him. And he was so quiet and like timid, it seemed like. But I think as soon as he shielded Ed and like proved that he could fight, I really liked his character. Like a gentle giant, and yet he does what's necessary in a time of crisis. Going into the character a little further, I wanted to look up the meanings of their names. And I'd seen like an interview with the author, and she had said she just looked through European baby names or something like that and found one she liked. But they're very fitting. So Edward's name means, in the English language, it means wealthy guardian. And that fits because he kind of is the guardian over his brother. And the wealthy part, state alchemists are compensated, so he's good to go. And for Alphonse, his name is of French origin. French from German, actually, and it means noble, ready for battle. And perfect. He's in a suit of armor, so he's ready for battle. He is the noblest of boys. The sweetest of cinnamon rolls. Also, Ed starts the series being 4'11".
Yes, and that is something we will keep track of throughout the show is his height.
And that's not including his platform boots and his little hair antenna that he's got. So he claims to be taller.
My brother always says is like, whenever a guy tells you his height, just like subtract like 2 inches from it.
Oh no.
I think that usually when you're shorter, you're like, you give like the exact, like, I'm
5'2.25".
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to get into our expertise, our areas of expertise. Meg will cover the scientific analysis of things, and I'm going to give a little bit on the animation. I don't have too much to say quite yet, just because, when you first watch it, you still get used to the style of the show, and I'll probably have more to comment on when I compare the show style to the manga style. But for now, I'm just going to say the character designs, which are very good. Starting with Edward. Golden hair and eyes. Hair is usually in a braid, so I think that's a great style for someone who is very active and wants the hair out of their face. He has bangs and a hair antenna hanging loose. I had a friend who told me that the hair antenna that you often see on guys in anime is called a stupid hair. He wears all black to hide the oil stains his automail leaves on his clothes, and he usually wears baggy clothes and gloves, perhaps to hide his automail even more. He likes red jackets. It's really more like a cape, but it's got a hood on it too. In Japan, black is associated with mystery, night, the supernatural, death, invisibility, and experience. Red is connected to heroic figures, so he's basically wearing a superhero cape. Red can also, in other cultures, symbolize courage, sacrifice, war, hatred, passion, and sin. But most of all, it's just an eye-catching color. Alphonse, he is a giant suit of armor. It looks to be medieval armor. It has lots of spikes, which is a big contrast with Al's easygoing and kind nature. The design is very angular, which again contrasts the soft spirit of Alphonse. The design is also practical, with a bag strapped to one leg for Al to keep things in, like his little journal that he writes down things he wants to eat when he gets his body back. It has a loincloth as well, which Al probably appreciates because that's like the closest thing he can do to wearing clothes. It also has a plume coming out of the helmet, which Al kind of considers to be his hair.
So I just wanted to give a basic definition of alchemy from the Merriam-Webster dictionary. So I have two different definitions here. The first is it's a medieval chemical science and speculative philosophy aiming to achieve the transmutation of the base metals into gold, the discovery of a universal cure for disease, and the discovery of a means of indefinitely prolonging life. And then the second, simpler definition is a power or process that changes or transforms something in a mysterious or impressive way. It's kind of interesting in this episode because I wouldn't really say like the freezing alchemist, like there's not really alchemy going on.
Right.
Because alchemy is like, changing one element or like chemical compound into something else. And that's not really what the freezing alchemist is doing. He's basically just like taking water and changing it into a different property. So like either gas, liquid, or solid. So I wouldn't really consider it alchemy, but I don't know. So sometimes the rules are a little bit like, I don't know, like exactly what.
There are certain laws to be followed, but it's not exact to be, explained in the show.
Yeah, so he's really like, it's interesting because he's more changing the temperature
right
rather than like the chemical makeup.
And this is a character who's an anime original. So
so maybe
this is not a reflection of the series as a whole. So I think it's better explained as it goes on.
Although I feel like as the show goes on, like they do bend the rules a little bit more, but I think they do a pretty good job of like explaining why they can bend them and like
learning
the story. Learning new things, and like the story, like it doesn't go like way out of proportion where you're like, okay, that would never happen. Like, and also, the
story never loses steam like other series do.
And also like we're already like in a fictional universe, and like alchemy doesn't actually work. Like it's not a real science anyway.
Literally exist. It's
like
a
you
concept.
Anybody listening, don't try alchemy.
Jeez, no. We will cover more of story elements and analysis for that, especially like the hero's journey and things. But for this first episode, suffice to say, it gave us whiplash. There was way too much crammed into here. However, it did a good job presenting the characters' personalities, and it gave a bit of insight into their motivations and sentiments. So, just hang in there. The next episode we'll rev it up more, and we'll be on our merry way.
Yeah. I agree with that. Like, I don't know. They mention like so many things that are really important to the story, like right away. And then they introduce so many characters that like we see again, and like they do a way better job of introducing them later on. So you just kind of meet them and you're like, oh, that's a person. And then like later on, you're like, oh, okay. Like they're actually important.
Yes. Every character from what I've seen with other people analyzing this show, they're always surprised how every character is important.
So yeah, that's kind of the end of our analysis and like recap of the show.
An introduction to the entire podcast.
Yes, introduction to the podcast. So now we're gonna transition to our outro, and so we're gonna try to do kind of 3 different things at the end of every episode.
And you can comment to let us know what you'd like to discuss in future episodes.
If you like. So we're each gonna share our favorite line of the episode, and then also what did we learn / what was the moral of the episode, or like just like the theme throughout the episode, and then which character pushed the story forward in the episode.
Yes.
And so we'll start with the favorite line of the episode. And Megan, you can go first.
Give him back. He's my little brother. He's all I have left.
Perfect. You can be a voice actor.
Hey. No, it's just Vic says it with all of the terror of a 10 or 11-year-old who has just lost someone so important. And I don't know, I too have siblings, and I do have an older brother, so it's I don't know, the sibling bond is one of my favorite aspects of the show, and seeing how much they mean to each other really just, it warms my heart, even if they go through lots of bad things.
Yeah. And then my favorite line was, there are some lines that you really shouldn't cross. And so like we already hinted at, like, this could have a double meaning, like he's talking to the freezing alchemist, don't talk about my brother and me that way, and but then also, like, you see his flashback at the same time, and you get the sense that something has gone horribly wrong, and that it's his fault. So kind of, and
he's kind of saying that about himself, like,
something that we talk about in like scientific community, like, we can do this, but should we?
Ethics.
Yeah. Okay, so what did we learn, or what was the moral of the episode?
Some lines just shouldn't be crossed.
Yes, same thing.
Yes.
Again, back to the flashback, you see something that happened in the past.
It wasn't supposed to be like this.
Yes.
Or whatever he said.
Yeah, no, I think that is what he said.
Okay, in the manga, it's I can't believe he's gone.
And it's all I think he said it's all my fault.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, who pushed the story forward in this episode?
Oddly enough, it was the anime original character who we never see again. Because if it weren't for the freezing alchemist, they wouldn't be chasing him all over the city. We wouldn't have doubts about the Fuhrer. We wouldn't have any of the conflict. And it was also the inciting incident that brought the characters out into the light.
So that is the end of our first episode.
Woo! We made it.
Yeah, we did it. So if you guys like our podcast, you can tune in every week. We'll be posting a new episode, and you can also follow us on Instagram under Fullmetal Beyond the Gate. And also, if you have any questions or comments or anything, we would love to hear from you guys. And so you can email us at fullmetalbeyondthegate@gmail.com, or also just message us on Instagram.
Yep. Make sure to share this with any of your friends who like the show or have been wanting to check the show out. And I'm not sure how reviews work for podcasts and whatever, but give us a good review if you're able.
Yeah. Give us a review. Follow us on Instagram. On our Instagram, we'll be posting, like, when we release new episodes, and then also any memes that we find and enjoy. Yeah, I think that's...
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to Beyond the Gate. We'll see you next time.